When Jim Abele took command of the newly launched and commissioned fleet submarine Grunion in May 1942 and left for waters off Alaska, he left behind a wife and 3 sons who soon settled in Newton, Massachusetts. On July 30th, the sub reported encountering and escaping heavy anti-submarine action off Kiska Island in the Aleutians. This was the last transmission from the sub. Commander Abele's wife Kay received a terse telegram from the Navy on September 30th, informing her that her husband was missing in action and presumed lost. For 60 years, this was the only information the family had about Commander Abele's fate, until a chance posting on the internet in 2002 began to unravel the mystery of the Grunion, leading to a remarkable odyssey and dramatic discovery in Alaskan waters.
Jim was very much Naval Academy. And one of the things that you learn in the Naval Academy is you're very disciplined and you pay attention to business. And in the Naval Academy, you sit very straight. And what you do is you sit, when you're dinner, on the last 2 inches of the chair, perfect posture. And if they catch you slumping, there's a little green line that goes around the wall, and it's something about that height. And you sit on this little green line, imagine this, for 1 hour. And needless to say, so my dad always had perfect posture without any question whatsoever. And I don't remember him hardly ever playing with his kids. He would teach us things all the time. But what he did, I mean, I can remember him teaching me how to print, or one time he taught me, what he said is, Bruce, go fix the faucet. And the faucet was leaking. I had no idea how to do it, but he kind of gave me a couple of guidelines, but I basically had to figure it out on my own. And I thought that was a very healthy way to learn. It's sort of interesting, we've had a number of calls, reports, letters, notes from people who was taught by him, and one of them was Chuck Peabody, who was once the governor of Massachusetts, and they said almost universally that he was the best teacher that he ever had. And he was just very down to earth and very practical. And I think that's a real solid compliment that I've heard enough times so I really believe it. I mean, I don't think it's just not floss. It really is the way he was, just because I've heard so many people say that.
I was fairly young when he was lost. And he was gone for a year before he shipped out. So I remember him as several specific things. I remember he used to give haircuts and tell stories. And he loved to work around the house. If he saw anything wrong, he'd fix it himself. He loved to take care of it himself.
I remember him giving me some pennies for, I think, brushing my teeth. But I also remember him scolding me for doing something, running down the stairs or something to that effect. He was a disciplinarian, but I think he was a fair one.
And so that's why what we did is we planned, as soon as the school year was over, that would move to Tiverton, Rhode Island, which was a barn that had been converted into a summer place, and was absolutely a fabulous place, 140 acres of land that went right down to the ocean. But on the other hand, it had an outhouse. It didn't have a bathroom. It never had a shower or any type of bathing facilities. What you had to do was go swim to get clean. And so we spent the summer there, and that's when Jim was gone. And then later on, Mother went to Newton, bought a house in Newton by herself. Jim wasn't around at that point at all, obviously. And then we moved to Newton in the fall, just in time for school. Tiverton was a fabulous place. It really was. I mean, it sounds, to get to our bedroom, we'd climb up a ladder. which was wonderful. But we had a large threshing floor, and of course you didn't have TVs in those days, and we used to do for hobbies was rope spinning, just like Will Rogers does. It was interesting at that period because the war was on, and that meant gas rationing, which means you really are careful with where you drive. And we didn't drive. I mean, that was just the way you did things. You don't drive very much. We had a victory garden, and we canned loads of foods. And basically, we had chores all the time. We had to go out and hoe the garden and so on. If you didn't do it, we wouldn't have food for the winter. And it was just that cold and hard. I mean, it was a serious problem. But on the other side of the story, there was a place to go camping there. There was woods around. We'd go hunting all the time. You know, it was a child's paradise. I stick with it. I love it today. If I went down there, December 7th was Pearl Harbor Day. Then the sub was launched the 22nd, and then he left. And I believe it was the May, somewhere early in May. And that's when what we did is we went down. We had a dinner at the Officers Club. And Brad was much better at this than I am, but we had a dinner, and at the end of dinner, Jim said he's got to go and work on the sub for a while. And we went home, and one of the neighbors called and said the sub was going out to sea. We never saw it again. But this is a common thing in the Navy. I mean, that you just are at sea a great deal, and you just have to learn to live that way. And I don't know that that's necessarily bad. I don't think we were hurt seriously as a result of that. On the September 30th, we were in Newton, and I remember we were playing football outside up in Newton Highlands, 31 Moffett Road, Newton Highlands. And Mother called us in and read us this note from the government. And, you know, as Brad said, you know, we were all sort of taught to be phlegmatic and, you know, you don't cry as a soldier and stuff like that, and we didn't. And Mother was, I mean, obviously it must have had a much bigger effect on her, but she hid it, and we didn't see it.
Our mother was, in retrospect, incredibly brave, because in addition to the fact that she'd lost her husband, and lost as opposed to knowing that he had been dead, I was also very sick at that point. I came down with something called osteomyelitis, which is sort of a rotting of the bone disease. It's an infection of the bone with a staph infection, which in that time period did not have a cure. And I went in and out of the hospital for quite a period of time. And so my mother obviously had a lot to deal with. 3 boys who were a little bit wild, always experimenting with things like explosives and stuff like that. So she did have some things to worry about. But at the same time, she allowed us to do that. She didn't keep us out of the water in order to protect us. She let us swim and in the surf, and both in real terms and in metaphorical terms, and we did that.
The person that I knew as my mother-in-law, she was a very strong lady. She worked very hard on family activities. The family connections were very strong. She sometimes bossed us around a bit. And didn't always like that. She had pretty firm ideas about how things should be done, but you have to look back and think that she was a widow, a woman alone, who raised 3 really fine sons.
She was a remarkable individual. She got the note, and then she got a check along with it. She sent it back. And I believe the reason she sent it back, she was being very businesslike, and she was always very good about that type of thing. She was saying, basically, the problem was that if I have the check, I'm agreeing to, quote, sell my husband or something like that for this loss, and I don't want to do that. I think that's just the wrong way of doing things. Roughly 6 months afterwards, we got notification of the Navy Cross, and that's quite a high honor. And what she felt was that the right thing to do, and Mother was very principled, and I really should say that about Jim too. I mean, if there's anything you learn at the Naval Academy is that you work for a high-level goal. And her feeling is that every one of the other 69 men on that ship deserved the benefit of that honor. And so she wrote a letter to every one of the next of kin. And we still have those letters. You have 2 big loose leaf folders right about that size, all sorted by crew member.
Dear Mrs. Hutchinson, as the wife of the captain of the Grunion, I have been thinking very much these days of the families of the men aboard. I know how very anxious we all are for any bit of news. Officially, I have heard nothing, but unofficially,
Dear Mrs. Abele,
I have heard that the Grunion made
please do not think I am being presumptuous in writing to you. Although I am a stranger to you, I assure you, I feel as though I have known you for a very long time. My name is Mary M. Channell. My home is in Revere. I am 22 years
Dear
old.
Mrs. Abele,
I am engaged to a man of...
I guess I better introduce myself right here and now. My husband, W.W. Cooksey, was machinist mate first class on the Grunion. Mother Cooksey sent your letter on to me.
Dear
and
Mrs.
I've been trying
Abele,
to find a chance.
I just can't tell you how much it meant to me to receive your letter. I had wished that I could know one of the many families, and then to hear from you. I am very thankful. Yesterday was 2 months since I received my
So
telegram.
we saved our money
I don't feel
and
they
picked
are
out
gone
our
for good,
rings.
and I hope-
He gave me a beautiful mahogany cowboy hope chest. Oh, we knew what we wanted. We had our bank books and bonds. We laid our plans. He was my parents' godson.
Are you as completely in the dark as I am as to what and where of the Grunion? My last letter was written June 29. This knowing nothing is pretty bad, isn't it?
My son wrote, Mom, the fellows are swell and our commander is tops. So I hope they are together no matter what happened to them. The boys were very proud of their big fish, and I am sure they made good use of it. I do hope that it will be found too. I suppose that it's because it housed them
There is
somewhere.
nothing else to do. But I love Al. I am lost without him. Everybody says that I am young and healthy and all that. Yet I can't, you know. I can't just take that and put it aside. Nothing is definite. Mrs. Abele.
With deepest sympathy, Catherine E. Abele.
Sincerely, Olive Cooksey.
With deepest sympathy, signed, Mrs. B.J. Miller.
Hopefully, I remain just Mary.
The evening breeze caressed the trees tenderly. The trembling trees embraced the breeze tenderly. Then you and I came wandering by.
And so basically what happened is she went out and started teaching in Newton Highlands. And there were already 2 music teachers. So what she did is she taught individual lessons to students. And she had a large number of students. And you'll still bump into them today, people that know my mother because they learned violin from her. And then the other thing we did is we were very, very frugal. I don't remember ever going on a vacation in my entire life. I've never done it. We would go to Tiverton, which I still love a great deal, but not, not down to the Caribbean or anything like that. We just didn't do it. And if we wanted things, we never had allowances, but if we wanted something, we'd go out and earn some money for it. We used to, shovel snow all the time, and we made puzzles for the Newton schools. And unfortunately, we didn't know if I'd had business school a little earlier, I would have learned how to price it correctly. But I remember we used to make puzzles, and they were very, very good puzzles, for 35 cents. And that was kind of underpriced. I think they sell them for $35 right now. Very businesslike. She always, I can remember many, many, many times saying, that is not a good business way of doing things. And you don't mix business with pleasure was another principle that she had. And I remember very much the one time I heard her really was upset, where there were 3 music teachers in the city of Newton, and 2 men and mother, and they gave raises to the 2 men, and they said was because they were supporting the family. Mother was not happy about that one at all. Because they have somebody else helping them out, but it's just mind-boggling. But that was the thinking that took place in those days, and she stuck to it. She got through it. But as a general rule, she gave us an awful lot of tasks. I remember later on I've been in the service. I've been in Japan, and I came back from on a plane, and they picked me up. And on the way home, Mother said, by the way, when you get home, would you clean up the cellar? And while you're at it, would you clean up the attic? and all right, I'll get it done. But it worked. She was after us all the time to get things done, and we did. It was sort of interesting. This place we had in Newton Highlands, everybody used to come around to play there. We had a very nice backyard. And in the winter, we would flood it. And it was one of the very few places in Newton you could play hockey. And I've always said to people that if a hockey rink was round, I might have made the Olympics. But that was some of the things we did. Another one we did, we had a cannon, and this probably would not have happened if Jim had been around because he said shouldn't do it. But anyway, we used to shoot this cannon off. And I remember one time, it was just a big pile of smoke and so on, but we put it out in the backyard and shoot the thing off. And I remember one time the fire engine was coming running down the street, and we dashed inside, put the cannon in the cellar, and we're out there saying, "Did you hear that loud noise out there?" It was very interesting. I don't think I ever saw a fight, a mad type fight between the brothers. We'd have disagreements, and we'd love to argue with each other, but we never got mad at each other. And and today, it's in our kind of maybe a funny ethics way of believing things, it's almost a sign of stupidity to let yourself get mad.
Bruce and Brad and John were always very close. They did all seem to share a similar worldview. They communicate very well. They think like each other. There's not a lot of disagreement between them. Bruce, I know, felt as the oldest that he had a responsibility to his younger siblings. But you get to the youngest, and he's very strong-minded too, and the middle who has his ideas.
Kay did very well by her boys. An MBA launched Bruce into a successful career as an engineer and early computer pioneer. After graduating from Yale in industrial design, Brad flew carrier-based Navy jets for a while and eventually bought and ran a very successful management recruiting company. John went to Amherst, became interested in the application of technology to medicine, and went on to become founder-chairman of Boston Scientific, a pioneer and leader in the field of less invasive medicine. Despite the challenges of being a single parent, Kay gave her sons a good foundation for life, but always in the background the question remained, what happened to the Grunion?
It's almost like winning the lottery 13 times in a row. I can't say it any other way. Here's what happened. Number one, Brad put together a book which we call the Jim Book. And it was not designed for the public, it was designed for the family, just to know, over the years, whatever happened in this whole story. And he put this thing together, and it described two things: the theories of that everything he could possibly find out about what had happened, which again at that point was friendly fire or operational. That was basically the conclusion. And he also described life without Jim.
When my brother was doing his research, he went into great detail about speculating what had happened and where it happened, because we had very little information. We had heard a few things here and there that certainly that it was in the Aleutians, but not exactly where, and we weren't sure whether it was south or north or whatever, but we knew that he had been assigned to that theater. And it was in 2002 that we came across a gentleman from Japan who had actually been a translator for the Japanese Navy. And he had translated the story of an interaction, a battle, if you will, between a Japanese freighter and a U.S. submarine, written by the commandant of this freighter. This gentleman had been in the regular Navy, but in fact was now in the Merchant Marine. And the story, for some reason or another, never got into the official Japanese records. And he had translated a brief story that we saw a summary of, and I found a website that was a hobbyist website of people who were interested in World War II Pacific naval battles between Japan and the U.S. And I was looking through this website with many posts, and I think on, it must have been the 20th or 30th page, going through literally hundreds of little descriptions of history, I came across the name that was the same name as the translator of this article. So I sent him, now that I had his email, because it was on the post, I sent him a note, and I said who I was and whether he was the same gentleman, his name was Yutaka Iwasaki, that had translated this article. And he sent a note back saying, "I am he." Now, given the commonalities of names in Japan, that was really quite amazing, and that led to a whole series of communications that we had, where we began to learn more and more and more. He wasn't just a hobbyist, he was a historian as well, and knew a great deal about the ships, about the Aleutians in particular.
Most importantly about his Yutaka's posting was that it gave us a location, or an approximate location. And that was an extremely important thing, because it narrowed it down from the Pacific down to maybe 5 or 10 square miles up north of Kiska Island in the Aleutians.
The story of the Grunion was always in the back of our minds, I think. Certainly as a mystery, it had things that really haunted you, and you want to know. And I think as we all get older in life, that need to know continues and becomes very strong. So at the time when we got the information about Yutaka Iwasaki's post on the web, we were just amazed, and you suddenly said, "Oh, here's a direction to go in." We wanted to know more and more and more, and it just, all those questions that had never been answered, here was a new angle, a new way to begin to look at things.
The next event that happened is I attended a lecture with Bob Ballard. And Ballard gave a talk about what he was doing, and I went up afterwards, and we talked for a while, and I asked him what he thought about the possibility of mounting a search might be. How much would it cost, and what's the likelihood of finding it, and what kind of information do you have to have in order to do it. He was very, very helpful. And finally I said, look, I can do this. I'm going to try. And that was the point at which we made the commitment to do a search.
When you suddenly get an answer to a mystery that's been there for 60 years, it's just a huge, energizing thing. It's just, wow, where do we go? And they're all very intellectually curious. They know how to do things. They have the stick-to-itiveness and the discipline to really follow and ask questions and probe. And the reason that this project is doable is because of their God-given abilities.
We're in the worst place in the world for weather, 100-mile-an-hour winds at times, and we're way, way, way down. The water at that depth is about 32 degrees, just to get a feel of it. So, but the main thing is, Bob Ballard has known something about it, and I think the Titanic is deeper than that. I think that's 12,000 feet. But the fact that it was possible, and so anyway, we had a big meeting, and Bob gave us some of the guidelines. I mean, we knew nothing about how you find subs in the underwater and so on. And the basic guideline was that you go in to start with the side scan sonar. And what a side scan sonar does is you tow this thing along close to the bottom, and it sends out sound signals as opposed to light signals, and these sound signals bounce off a hard target such as a sub, and they come back and they are processed so that you can tell very clearly that it's a hard target as opposed to a soft target, which is the landscape, you might say. And so we had hoped that we could go out with a side scan sonar, and then if we found it, we'd try to get an ROV, which is a remote operated vehicle instead, and then we'd go down and look at it with a camera.
In another amazing Grunion coincidence, the son of a close friend of Susan Abele's, Peter Lowney, was an experienced crab fisherman who had worked in the Aleutians. He helped the Abele's locate and charter a boat that could accommodate a side-scan sonar. The boat set out in late July 2006 for the Kiska Island area near the tip of the Aleutians. Lowney went along on the trip as the family's representative and videotaped the trip. He also sent back regular reports and photos via satellite communications. On August 15, 2006, the crew picked up an unusual sonar image, looking very much like the outline of a submarine. Although they couldn't be sure it was the Grunion, it was in the right place and was about the right size. Project manager Art Wright reported back to the Abele's that he was 95% sure they'd located the sub.
It's something that unless you've experienced it, you cannot describe it with words. Because all I can do is I can say it's something like you've experienced, but unless I know that you've had that same type of experience, there's no words like it. It's an incredible experience. There's no question about that, period. And what happened is, it was sort of an interesting situation, is the emails would come in at 2 o'clock in the morning. And this is far better than any movie you'll ever go to. I mean, you get these emails, I mean, just incredible story every day. And what had happened is Sue knows a reporter, one of the Globe reporters, and independently, we had not any indication they would found the sub at that point, but even the search itself was a big deal. And so this Ralph Anelli was going to come over and have an interview just purely on the fact that we're doing the search. And he was coming by at 10 o'clock. And so anyway, but that night at 2 o'clock, we got the first message that they'd gone in and they were up down to, they're 95% certain that they found the sub. And so I explained it to Ralph, and I carefully left the fine part out of it to the very, very end of the interview. And I just said, at 2 o'clock, we think we've got it. And it was on headlines.
For Bruce, it's raised emotional issues that he's been pretty good at keeping in check. I think things come up. I've seen him dream about things now. I've heard him come out of a sleep and talking about the Grunion. It's a very deep image in his mind, this search. I mean, and he thinks about it night and day, and you can tell.
And once they found it, then we wanted to go out there, and for several reasons. One, we wanted to see what the results were while they were out there, number two is we wanted to bring the tapes back, because the airlines were, at that point, you had to check it, and that stuff was, there's cameras and tapes and everything like that. It's just a big problem. Luckily, John has a private plane, so that makes it viable. So we flew out to Adak, and they met us at Adak, which is only 240 miles back east from Kiska. And the third thing we were doing is to look at what they looked for was several of the Japanese ships, which they found. There was an Arari, which was a destroyer that was sunk by the Growler, and there were the two sub-chasers that had been sunk by the Grunion. And we have found those also.
In August 2007, the search vessel Aquila returned to the location off Kiska Island, where the fuzzy images had been recorded the previous year. John Abele went along as the brothers' representative on the trip. This time, the Aquila was equipped with a remote-operated vehicle carrying still cameras and high-definition video cameras. Incredibly, within 20 minutes of beginning their search, the crew located the mangled wreck of an American sub. Almost, John Abele commented, as though they were meant to find it. Though there were further difficulties before they could survey the wreck, this time there was no doubt about what they had found.
The goal is to find out. There were two parts. A, we wanted to substantiate or clarify what the target was, to see whether it was the Grunion. And the second thing is to see if we can figure out what happened to it. And there's no question about it, that was the Grunion. The second part, we have not found an answer yet. But we have a lot of information, and if we use it right, we may come close to it. The damage was much more than we expected. We expected it to be, basically together, and it was not. It has very heavy, hydrostatic damage. The bow is gone, which we kind of suspected before, but we have very severe crimping at the point where the bow broke off, where the bow disappeared. That's kind of significant, and it tells you something, but we're not quite sure what it tells you. Well, what happened is you have to be very careful. I'm telling it a little bit from what the Aora, who was the military captain on the Kana Maru, said. He said, all of a sudden, somebody said they saw a torpedo coming at the Kana Maru. The first one went underneath the Kana Maru. The second one hit the Kana Maru on the starboard side and dismantled it. It stopped it, and the engines wouldn't run anymore. And so the people in the Kana Maru started firing. Then there were several more shots, and they bounced off the Kana Maru. They didn't explode. And then another one went low. This was a common problem with the torpedoes. They would not explode. The detonators were very bad, and they would go too low, which would mean they wouldn't explode either. And they break in half, as a matter of fact, what happened. And so anyway, the people in the Kana Maru were saying is that he shot two more shots. Actually, he shot total of 6 shots. The first one went under, the second one hit and exploded. All the others were duds of some type or another. Either they went lower or bounced off the ship and broke in half. And meanwhile, the people on the Kana Maru were shooting at the conning tower, not the conning tower, just the periscope was coming up, but that was all. And the sub did some kind of unusual moves. This is according to the Aora, again, the military commander. And by their report, what they say is that there was a wake that was being caused by the conning tower being close to the surface. And they had 2 guns. They had a machine gun, and then they had a 3-inch gun, 8 centimeter gun. But the larger one, which is a 3-inch gun, hit on the 84th shot. It hit that wake that was being caused by the conning tower. And at that point, there was a dull explosion, and an amount of dirty brown liquid squirted up in the air, and a rod shot up and then fell down again. Now that's all we know, and at that point, they went out later by the next day, and there was oil slick still in that area, which convinced me that, yes, the sub must be there. There are 2 or 3 theories, and we've got to be a little bit careful about trying to get an overall theory, but one person or group of people is arguing that the shell hit the induction valve and flooded the induction pipes, which are not collapsed as a result of hydrostatic pressure, which is interesting, and that somehow that caused the sub to lose control, buoyancy control, and it plummeted down, and then it went through all types of hydrostatic damage and so on. Another alternative, well, there's a number of people that are talking about the circular torpedo, but I have personally have reservations about that. Another hypothesis is that the sub, for some reason or another, lost depth control, plummeted to 1,000 feet, where it began to have very, very serious hydrostatic damage. But before that, one of the torpedoes, the 6th torpedo was shot, came out and came through the bow and did not explode, because if they hit directly on, they don't explode. Then once it gets it down to about 1,000 feet, you get tremendous damage that takes place in the forward torpedo room, and something could have hit that detonator at a side angle, which is what makes it explode. And so, it's a possibility, or it might have been an explosion of from the hydrogen from the batteries. If we could find an answer that a large number of experienced submariners who are skeptical, who are highly interested in the project, and who have a good solid base in the physics of the world, and that they agree that this was what happened, that would be a very successful outcome.
My name is Henry DeStoop, and I'm related to Albert Edward DeStoop, who was a chief torpedo man on the USS Grunion. He got lost in 1943, and I was only 7 years old, and I often wondered what happened to him. It's really been great, and it's kind of bringing some closure, because all through the years since I was 7 years old, I used to wonder and dream of what happened to my brother, and now I'm finally going to know, so it's really wonderful.
Well, my name is Donna Francis, and my father was on the USS Grunion, Donald Francis Welch. I never knew him. I was born shortly after the submarine was missing.
My name's Laura Conley. This is my mom, and that was my grandfather, Donald Welch, on the sub.
I always wondered, as they say, the fantasy that he was really alive and a prisoner of war. And you hear about people coming out of the jungles after World War II, and I thought, oh. But then you get married and you have children and your life goes on, so those thoughts diminish. The one thing that came to my mind right away was seeing the island and how cold and how deserted, and almost as if the entire island bears witness to these men, was there for them.
Growing up, I can remember the stories of how she would think in her childhood that he would come home. And it was just a mystery. We never knew what really happened. So to have found the sub and have closure to, okay, this is where he is, and this is what happened to him, I think it brings an element of peace into all of our lives, but mostly my mom's.
I think it's important to remember how these men felt going. My father couldn't wait to go and defend his country, and I'm assuming that every man on that submarine felt the same way, but there was such an air of patriotism at that time in our country. And if you remember that, it helps to keep it alive.
My name is Merrill Kretschmann, and my father's name was Carson Raymond Martin, and he was chief motor machinist mate first class on the Grunion. It was very devastating to lose my father, because he was very, very important to me. And we had a special relationship. I always considered myself a daddy's girl. He actually passed away around my birthday. And actually, he had a birthday present for me on the submarine. It was hard for my mom. It was hard for my brother, who was 10 years old at the time. And it's hard being without a father. All the children had a father in school, and I was always the girl who had a father that was missing. I always have felt that he's been with me all these years, and I've always been searching for him, hoping that sometime, somewhere along the line, we would find the news. And I was so happy when 2 years ago, my daughter Nancy had seen something on the internet about things that were going on, and she told me about it. And then last year they contacted me and they told me the wonderful news.
Well, anytime I think you start on a project, you have a goal, you want to find out. I think, you know, sometimes there's a concern, oops, we don't know what we'll find. We might find something we didn't want to know. But I think that the knowing is so important for the historical record, for just to put things to rest in your mind, just to get an answer.
We feel that we are in a very unique stewardship position, if you will. I do personally, and being able to have the resources to do this, it relates not just to our father, but it relates to the other people who are on this submarine, and to the Navy, and to people in the country. We are putting the final pages in a story that started a long time ago, and in a way it's perhaps, as I say, putting a period on the story, but also helping a lot of people who did lose their fathers get an understanding as well. Beyond that, we're thinking that we want to identify the Japanese ships that were also sunk, to make it a bit more of an international effort, in an effort to recognize that wars aren't the best way to settle disputes. And awful lot of people get caught up. But at the same time, there was a lot of bravery on the soldiers of both sides. And sometimes you can, by creating relationships, decrease the likelihood that one would approach a solution of the same sort again.
Oh, hear us when